Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, the subject is going to be about US project and not only US. I'm happy to be today with Jack and Jean-Charles. Jack, I'll let you the floor to start.
Thank you, Jean. Welcome, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. So today we'll talk about US, and as you can see already, the next webinar will happen on the 15th of May. So we check. Normally, it's not a bank holiday anywhere on the planet, and we will talk about IOC, so international company. Because you will see, well, I'm sure you noticed that they are changing a bit their attitude. So we'll have a dedicated session on them. As usual, you will receive the slides of today, so don't bother taking any screenshot, and you will also receive the invitation for that webinar. Regarding the agenda, we'll have a, let's say, usual funnel approach where we'll start with an helicopter view on the, let's say, on the market and what is impacting the energy market. And then we will have a specific look at the Trump factor. Just to be clear on that, it's obvious, but it doesn't cost a dime to say it. Here we are only looking at the consequences on the energy market, so it's a pure business approach. We will absolutely not talk about politics or ideology or whatsoever. And then we will start to look at the projects and more into the details about who are the operators and what are the type of projects. And if you have any question during the session, during the webinar, don't hesitate to ask them and to type them directly in the chat. We will address and answer all the questions at the end of the presentation. Few words about us, but I'm sure you already know most of that, so I'll be quick. We have always our three-pillar approach. So today we are doing the blue part with our expertise. We also building and continuing our clubs to be done by country, and all the data at project level that you will have in today's presentation are extracted obviously from our Project Smart Explorer tool. Regarding the scopes, no more changes so far, so we still cover the same application. I'm sure that you notice that you have more and more notification on mining and geothermal, but we always covers, let's say, the energy business. Talking about energy, maybe Jean, you can start with the shift that is happening currently. It seems that maybe oil and gas is not dead after all.
Yeah, well, really indeed. In fact, a lot is happening currently, and I mean, we are now getting used since COVID that the news and the description about our business are happening not anymore into a decade period, but are now happening weeks per weeks. So it's quite busy, and clearly, I mean, we are changing era. We are changing era because we are passing from a world on last 30 years of global energy to a political energy. The last two disturbances that we really got from the market in terms of flow of energy were the first one, of course, the Russia-Ukraine war, which is still, I would say, ongoing in terms of energy impact, because really the gas pipeline, which was crossing through Ukraine from Russia to Europe, was still being used 2 months ago, or a bit more than 2 months ago, 2 months and a half. So it's still going on, and the disruption is, of course, still going on. And now we have a second layer with the US administration arriving, I would say, in office, which is clearly using energy as a kind of a bargaining power with all the other regions, trying to rebalance a little bit their trade. And in terms of energy business and energy project, now we are changing era and requirements. Where before with globalization, everything was targeting to have cheap energy and available energy. Now we need to have a clean energy, which is politically secured, which is sovereign, which is available, and you can more or less only do business with countries where you have, I would say, a kind of a trust and a confidence, which is, of course, triggering a lot of projects, especially into the distribution of energy that we are witnessing now, and that should be, I would say, the new period of time. There is also a shift into the vision of energy, and many actors have been shifting back and forth in the last years. But we took two examples. The one from the IEA, the International Energy Agency, located in Paris. And just to enlighten this phenomena, we took two sentences from their director, Fatih Birol, where in 2023, which it was only 2 years ago. At some point, it was right after, I would say, COVID, and right after also all this Russian-Ukraine situation. And at the time, his statement was to say, okay, there is no need to invest in new oil and gas fields because we have more than enough to, I would say, produce for the rest of time. And when you come back to this week, because you know that this week is CERAWeek in US, he just declared on Monday, if I remember correctly, that I want to make it clear there will be a need for investment in oil and gas, especially to address the decline of existing fields. And clearly, he's opening again the door for oil and gas investment, a little bit like all the others, I would say, agencies or market analysts were doing. But also, you see a shift which is also coming from the entire market, where we see the demand of oil and gas still going up massively for the next coming years. And the other one shifting, and we are also going to talk a lot about this during our next webinar, but international oil companies are, I would say, here we put the play on word back in black, because BP made the headline 2 weeks ago by saying, okay, guys, we are resetting completely the strategy of the business. And also Shell made quite a big boom when they made a forecast that the demand for LNG should grow by 60% in the coming 15 years. In fact, those oil and gas companies, even if they did not completely quit the oil and gas market, were having strategy which were decreasing massively their investment in oil and gas. And it all started during COVID, I would say in 2020. But now we see that the shift is out and they are coming back to oil and gas. Why? Because the long-term vision and demand of oil and gas is starting to be quietly publicly recognized that it will still go up. And of course, if this demand still go up, you need someone to produce this energy to answer the demand. So that's why it's opening the door for those companies again. And also what is more, I would say, pragmatic, that if you look at the return of investment of those oil companies into all the other stream of energy, there is nothing matching the oil and gas investment. So for oil and gas companies, of course, they are more interested to pursue those investments in oil and gas. It doesn't mean that they are stopping all the energy transition. It's quite clear that some of those companies will stop their project in renewable because none of them really made money into renewable projects. Also, it has to be clear that as there is no operation in renewable, it's quite complex for an operator to jump in. It's more a utility market, let's be honest. But they are still investing in renewables through side companies, like Ørsted now belongs for a part to Equinor. So Equinor use Ørsted to make those investments. We see the same with Total Energy and Saft, for example. Also, they are still staying in energy transition because you may have seen the news that ExxonMobil, Total Energy, and all those guys are starting to sign large contracts for green hydrogen usage. Of course, those contracts will not be, I would say, executed directly by Total. So the production will be made by an Air Liquide, by a RWE in Germany, for example. But of course, there will be the offloaders, so they are, I would say, indirectly contributing to this energy transition. And last is that there's still a lot of projects in decarbonation and recycling. They are still going on, and of course, where they are using their expertise to manage those projects as well. So they are, I would say, stepping out of renewable, still going into energy transition or the rest of it, and of course, they are back to oil and gas quite massively. Now, if we are talking about US, of course, we cannot really miss the election of Trump. And here we call this part the Trump factor because clearly it made a huge impact for the US market, but not only. And we try to because Trump is making volumes of communication, so sometimes you can be a little bit underwater. But we try to analyze a little bit or to analyze what was the process. And from first day, it was quite clear that Trump will put his hands into energy. And we took here 6 decisions that he signed, which of course made have direct or indirect impact on our business. The first one, and I think is the more important one, is that he declared national energy emergency. Even if US is not really into any energy emergency, to be honest, but by triggering this decree, it grants the White House of all the ability to limit environmental restriction, meaning that here you completely bypass, for example, the air permit, the FERC agreement, etc. So all the power which was redistributed into the U.S. administration, into the federal state, and also into the federal government, sorry, and the states. Now everything is concentrated into the hand of the White House. So clearly, it's a top-down vision of energy. The second point, it was, of course, US stepping out of the Paris Agreement, which is opening the door for all the fossil energies and fossil projects, of course. Third, was revoking all the electrical cars, where the target was to have around half the market of electrical vehicles by 2030. So, of course, when you revoke this target, you open the door for more gasoline. So it has an impact on refineries project, of course. Fourth was the famous sentence, drill, baby, drill. I think it's quite transparent what is behind. So all the fracking in US and even in the drilling in Alaska is coming back to the table. Fifth was the LNG export, especially, I would say, referring to the Biden signature to stop all those LNG export, of course, are back to the table. And last was the decision about the wind, where here I put a quotation of Donald Trump. We are not going to do the wind thing, which is self-explanatory as well. So here, what the first six, I mean, it was just the first day, so massive impacts, 6 decisions, but drives a little bit the vision of energy, vision which is internal for the US, but also external for the export. And if we look those two visions, first, let's have a look of Trump effect into the US energy. Here, the plan is quite clear. The plan is to generate an abundance of cheap energy. Okay, why to do it? But of course, because to boost the economy, to slow down the inflation that is still going on massively in US. And when he mentioned, when he appointed, as Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, which is a former CEO of Liberty Energy, I think it's the second biggest fracking company in North America. So, I mean, it gives you a little bit the trend. This Chris Wright has recently said last week that Shell could boost production even at $50 per barrel on oil. So here, just behind this, you see that they want to, I would say, generate more volume, clearly, to decrease the price. And they can go as down as $50. It should not be a problem for US economy and for US project as well. So you see, it's really a leverage on oil and gas, trying to decrease the price of energy. Behind it, there have been 4 announcements, but here we will focus on 3. The first one is the plan of US gas power generation, adding 46 gigawatts of gas power, so gas turbine most likely, by 2030 to power artificial intelligence. 46 gigawatts is half of the capacity in terms of production of Germany. So you can imagine how much in 5 years you need to build up in production capacity, in, of course, electrical grid connection to manage this plan, knowing that behind we are talking about 25, 30 million tons of LNG per year to supply those turbines. So it's a massive plan, which of course is going to raise the usage of gas into US. The second point is that all the US banks, a little bit under the radar, stepped out of the Net Zero Banking Alliance, so the part of the Paris Agreement which is applied to banks, meaning that all the US banks are back to investing in oil and gas projects and supporting, I would say, all the loans and credits for those projects. And last but not least is the stops of all the Inflation Reduction Act, which was started by Biden. All those loans and granted for energy transition project to date are frozen. So clearly what is behind means here the Trump administration is driving US energy to go massively for oil and gas, massively for upstream and midstream projects, both, while at the opposite, starting to block a little bit the public money for the energy transition project. So that was what is internal. If we look at now the, I would say, outside effect, as I say, the vision is mostly to, I would say, use energy as a kind of a diplomatic bargain, clearly, because if you look at US energy today, it's vital for the world, clearly, in terms of economics, and that's why US is starting to increase massively those volume of gas. today, Europe, for example, import about 40% of its gas from US, but there is still 20% coming from Russia. And Donald Trump made it quite official that those 20% from Russia, no more, okay? Meaning that those 20 points, they should, I would say, be bought most likely from US. So US is trying to, I would say, put some pressure on all its partners to sign long-term agreements on gas supply, especially to EU, where it's going to be a large market. But we see it being done also with Bangladesh. Bangladesh has already signed an LNG exporting contract, and discussions are ongoing with India as well. So you see how interesting it is also to use those projects. And of course, if those contracts are signed, you can be sure that some terminals will be built, etc., etc. The political also behind all those 25% tariff are triggering projects. So it's a little bit indirect, but we have the example of Canada, for example, where Canada is producing a massive volume of oil and was exporting most of its oil to US for the moment. And with 25% tariff, of course, it's not competitive anymore. So Canada is starting to, I would say, renew a project which was, I would say, postponed for forever, to be able from Alberta to export its oil to the west and to the east. So building a pipeline to have access to both oceans on both sides of Canada. So you see, all from tariff, it's triggering wave of projects, I would say, trying to, I would say, reorganize a little bit our distribution of energy. Globally, it means that Trump's vision of energy is that they should become the biggest exporter and takes the lead on the export of oil and gas, clearly. It's also a good way to use energy to compensate the trade imbalance that US has with some region, China, also with Europe. And of course, when you are producing those kind of volume of gas, because we are talking sometimes in terms between 100 to 200 million tons of energy per year, you can imagine if you convert this to dollar, how much money flow we are talking about, and it's quite, I would say, benefit for US. Now, if we look at the Trump factors in number of projects, we made the comparative from our database, Project Smart Explorer, on US LNG project. And we took it at 2 dates. We took it before Trump arrived in office, so in January 5th. And we had in the database 20 projects for a total of shy of 100 billion US dollar. And we made the same, I would say, extract the same scope in March 12th, so just on Monday. And here we had 31 projects with 257 billion US dollar in the database. And here is clearly a Trump factor, because those projects, to be honest, some of them were already existing, but those projects were stopped because of Biden, I would say, momentum on export of LNG, for example. And of course, those projects which were stopped, they were not completely canceled. They were on shelf, and those are back into action. And what is quite interesting is that we see also all the existing projects which were already in the database have all announced a second phase or a third phase if they were already in their second phase. We are also starting to see new addition of completely new projects, new programs which were coming out of nowhere. But you see in terms of scale how much business has been put in a loop in just 2 months, which is a little bit, amazing to imagine in terms of volume. One graph which I put here, which has been published last week by the Department of Energy from US, is showing how much LNG export they would like to have by scenario. And while all the scenario you have from the yellow to the blue one are showing what's the scenario, I would say, under Biden administration, you have here in green the new scenario of LNG export targets. And of course, you see that it's triggering a huge wave. And if you, I would say, evaluate the volume of export as of today compared to 2050, they want to triple it in terms of export. Okay, so it gives you a little bit the strategy of the administration, but also I would say the project you need to line up behind to make sure that you can go from 20 billion cubic feet per day to 60 billion cubic feet per day. So it's quite massive to imagine. And of course, it's a lot of project and a lot of money that is going to arrive on the table on just US. Now, how much does it correspond into projects? That's often quite an important question. First, there is one point when we discuss US with our clients, which can be tricky, but we really want to define it correctly. When in Project Smart Explorer you filter US, you can have two types of projects. You can have project where the asset is located in US, and you can have also the project where the feed or the EPC is being done in US. And in fact, if you take from Project Smart Explorer everything passing by US, you will have two type of projects. It's about 200 that we have today, but three-quarters of those projects are projects which are located in US. Okay, so the asset will be in US, the operation, the plant, everything will be in US. And for 1/4 of those projects, it's projects which are going most likely to Africa or South America, but where the feed and EPC are being done in US. And it shows a little bit the footprint of US in this market. Even if the US project, where the project is located in US, only account for 22% of the market, if you add also I would say all the capacity of engineering, boom, it jumps to 31% of the market, where it's project where the feed and EPC are being done in US, and sometimes the I would say execution is not in US itself. What is quite important in this phenomena is that if you take all the projects which are located in US, so the asset will be in US, for 94% of them, okay, they will have their feed and EPC in US as well. It's quite unique. There is no other country in the planet where you can work this way in terms of in-country value. It's perfect, I would say, because it means that if an asset is to be built in US, the feed and EPC will be automatically in US. So all the supply chain, all the decision centers will be in US. So it's quite important to have in mind. And of course, it's quite pragmatic. So if you want to access the US market, big part of the business will be directly there in terms of feed and EPC. Now going to the, I would say, pipeline of projects. Here we made the split according to the three categories of Project Smart Explorer. You have on the top petrochem in red, you have in blue oil and gas, and you have energy transition in green. You see that it's booming. Okay, it's going up massively. It's going up because energy transition is going up first, and you see the pattern, it's growing quite fast, but it's growing up also if you compare just the blue size, okay, just the oil and gas. You see that the size of the oil and gas in the last 3 years and I would say the forecast for the next 3 years in blue, we are changing era, clearly. I mean, you can clearly map here the Biden administration and here's the Trump administration, where the ambition for volume of oil and gas is completely massive. And that's this forecast. I mean, here is not taking out down. Of course, we don't know all the projects that should be awarded for 2028, but you see how much the pie is already up. So which means that by the time we arrive to 2028, a lot of projects will come on top of the table, and you imagine how much business is going to represent. So here we are talking massive volume of business, and here is the forecast, and here is what has been already awarded. And if you look at only the EPC contract which have been awarded, you see that in 2025 we're already higher than 2024. Why? Because a lot of projects which were challenged by the environment, by the political effect, etc., we are waiting for Trump election to be awarded. And on the last 2 months, we have seen arriving to the table a massive volume of award in US because of this situation to have, I would say, a better condition around it. And you see that for energy transition, it's also the case. Okay, we often think that Trump is great for oil and gas, which is in figures, I would say, quite true, but it's also the case for energy transition, where the ramp is still going up. So it's quite interesting to see that the forecast to say, hey, oil and gas is going to be massive and energy transition will take the spare is quite realistic. You see that US is already, I would say, going up since 2022, and the pace is not going to slow down, to be honest, from what we see in our figures. And you have seen from US LNG what has been announced in terms of volume. It's completely crazy, so it should not slow down in the future neither. What is quite interesting, if we look at just the US market, is how much the project type is shifting, going from one to another every year. Here we make really the map on the last 2 years, and I would say this year and in the future, of what should be the total capex to be awarded in US, and what was the average, and the split between oil and gas in blue, petrochem in red, and energy transition. And you see that oil and gas, remaining more or less half of the market on the last 3 years. Okay, 50% of the investment were more or less linked to oil and gas. But if we look at the future, the period 2026-2028, you see that today 3/4 of what we see in the database is oil and gas. Partly because, okay, maybe energy transition projects are announced a little bit later, etc. But okay, not to this extent. Clearly, here the vision of energy in US is turning more and more oil and gas. At the opposite, if you look at petrochem in red, you see that petrochem have been melting like snow on the sun on the last few years. Why? Because okay, the market for gasoline, for example, was not organized. The vision was a little bit disturbing, and also because a lot of investment which are made in, I would say, around petrochem belongs now to the energy transition category. If, for example, you are doing a project of electrifying a refinery. Okay, for us, it's an energy transition project because it's an electrification project. But as it is, I would say, installed into a refinery, for some companies, it enters their petrochem product. Okay, so that's why it's not completely true that petrochem is slowing down that much. Part of the petrochem investments which were made around the red area before are today more into the green area, or in terms of marketing, are putting in this green area to be sure. Also, you see that energy transition is still going on, still persists, and then slowing down, not so much because the capex in energy transition in the future will reduce, but because oil and gas is just exploding in comparison. Okay, so it's quite important to see how much it has shifted from, if you look at from 2023 to 2026, which is only 4 years, how much it has shifted from one to another. Last but not least, as we were talking about energy transition, US is a specific market because I think US market, if you remember the webinars we did in the past 2-3 years ago, we were saying that the period 2020 to 2024 was the period of technical maturity, where we had pilot project, demonstrator project, trying to prove, I would say, their technology. And we are globally a little bit still in that position. But for US, now we are starting the business maturity period where, okay, it's great to have your process, it's working, but does it create value? Okay, which in US is a big question mark sometimes for some application. And here I put you on the right, the capex, the total capex per type of plant, and you see that ammonia, blue, green, sustainable aviation fuel, carbon capture are still moving up quite massively. And in fact, there is some, I would say, applications which are crashing and others which are doing very well. For example, in renewable, solar projects are becoming quite profitable. If you look at all the sunbelt in US, those projects of solar are going and moving forward quite quickly. They are producing electricity quite cheap, so those projects will carry on. At the opposite, the windmill project, especially offshore on the East Coast, all those projects were already struggling quite massively, and today they have been quite killed by Trump, to be honest. So it's a little bit black and white. If you look at decarbonation part of this energy transition, a lot of projects were pending on Inflation Reduction Act, loan and financing. And as this was frozen, the project associated to those financing have been frozen. Also, if you look at hydrogen and especially green hydrogen, there is not a market of hydrogen which is being developed in US as an end product. I mean, nobody is trading hydrogen as it is. Some people are trading gas, they are trading oil, but nobody trades hydrogen. So the project of, I would say, producing green hydrogen and then sending it to a market where it would be traded, it's not happening, to be honest. What we see happening at the opposite is the usage of hydrogen for e-fuel, for SAF, etc. What we see happening even faster, especially in decarbonation, is electrification. So this electrification of gas train or LNG train, for example, is massive. Today, you don't have any LNG train which is being developed without electrification of the train or without carbon capture. And even if the air permit is not requested, etc., all the companies have, I would say, integrated into their own, I would say, roadmap and strategy to reduce their carbon footprint. Okay, so it's quite interesting to see that despite Trump being elected and maybe, let's say, less ambition on this situation, it's still happening and it's still happening quite strongly. As I mentioned, the recycling is going very well. All the projects of biofuel, e-fuel, alternative fuel, renewable fuel, whatever fuel, sustainable aviation fuel, they're still on fast track. Why? Because they create value. Okay, the business model is quite good, especially because it's small units which are redistributed and decentralized around the country. So we see them happening more and more and taking off quite quickly on the market. Now passing the ball to Jack for this part on key players and project type.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Jean, for this insightful perspective. Let's start with, let's say, with the map, the visual map of project in US. So you can see projects are a bit everywhere, but the hub remains. Texas and Louisiana, and the coast in the Gulf of Mexico. For the projects where you have around the 3/4 of the capex being done in this area, and both for, let's say, oil and gas and petrochemical activities. You have a second hub, let's say, in the East Coast, if you are looking at energy transition projects, where you can have we have several projects over there in the East Coast. Okay, but the heart remains Houston area. Okay, if we look now at who are doing these projects, it's quite clear that independents are leading the game, and they are leading far away because they are doing 2/3, even more than 2/3 of the investments are being done by independents. We made a webinar on independence operators a few months ago. So if you want again the material, don't hesitate to ask to have a bit more insight on that operator type. So it's not only small independents. When we talk about them, they can be huge, and we have here on the slide the three projects that add up to 100 billion, leading by independents. So some are actually let's say gigantic actors on the market. Two additional points. First, the type of let's say of contracts. 60% of these contracts are reimbursable. Again, that's an information that you have in Project Smart Explorer, so don't hesitate to access that information to ensure that you are speaking to the right, let's say, decider at the end of the game. And the last information, something also that we have been saying for years at every webinar and every workshop, feed is king, because most of let's say the feed now are automatically translated into a EPC contract. That's the fast track project that Jean mentioned. So still important to be involved at feed. The following slide is some information on two ranking tables. On the left, you have the ranking per operator, and on the right, the plant type. It's maybe not easy to read on your screen right now, but again, you will have the slide, so you will be able to see it carefully after that. But anyway, the big takeaway on the left part is to see that, of course, independents are leading. So you have all their names also appearing on the list, and in that list, we also took into consideration where especially IOCs were in some joint ventures. So that's why you have some of them on the top of the list also, because they are also operating on joint venture. I'm sure you will have some surprise, maybe looking at that list, maybe looking at Chevron at position 17 or 16 in that list, maybe a surprise that you may not have foreseen. On the right part, you have the application. Without a surprise, Jean explained that it's all about LNG currently over there. So it's the number one type of plant by far. I mean, it's 9-10 times bigger than the second one on the list. And then you have all type of application, again, in oil and gas, petrochemical, and also in energy transition. Again, Jean explained that it's going to be a bit of challenge for some application, but others will continue to grow. Even if we will have a streamlined in terms of actors and licensors and so on, some of these applications can't be ignored anymore. You can see, for example, in the list that SAF is in terms of investment just right after FPSO in US. If we look at the last slide before going to the conclusion, and maybe a tip on how to address this US market from Europe. Obviously, when you're based in Europe and in US, it's another story. But if you are based in Europe and want to access this US market, you know that this market is quite competitive. There are a lot of local distributors that are quite aggressive. But there are some types of projects that could be very interesting to track and to chase. It's all the projects that are done, designed and executed in the US, but following European standards. Because for these projects, you won't have the local competition. Here you will have only the European companies that will follow these projects, and you can extract quite easily within Project Smart Explorer all these projects. You just have to combine two filters quite easily. First one, extract all the projects in US, and then apply a filter on the electrical standard, select IEC, and here you will have a list that is usually moving between 40 and 50 projects always, following these two patterns. So design in US, but following European standards. These projects could be very interesting for you to track if you want to enter this market. Jean, if you have something to add, I'll let you do it. Else, I'll let you do the conclusion, and then we will have a Q&A session that I see that already some questions are popping up in the chat.
Perfect. No, thank you, Jack. I mean, it was quite brief, this chapter of US, but of course, what is quite clear is that US is developing their oil and gas capacity. They're doing it for two reasons. First, they're doing it for internal reason, to have the cheapest energy as possible to, I would say, boost their local economy. But they're also doing it to, I would say, increase their, I would say, footprint globally, and to, of course, use this cheap energy to export to Europe, but not only to Europe. And behind this capacity increasing massively in terms of gas, because if you look at the forecast for 2050, it means that half of the capacity of LNG export globally will belong to US. Of course, Trump administration intends on using this energy capacity as a diplomatic tool to bench and to push the people, because in all economy, energy is still critical and still a big security. And we learned that really tough in Europe. And that's why projects are today, you see a tsunami of projects really coming to US. And those projects, they need to go fast. Because if you take the example of LNG project, 6 months ago, they were, I would say, canceled, postponed due to the US administration. And there is still a big question mark about the next administration, because even if Trump has been re-elected just now, Trump will be in office for 4 years and then someone else. Meaning that, okay, in 4 years, do those projects will still have the approval and the support of the administration to go on? Big question mark. So those projects are going on fast track, and they would try as much as possible to be live before the next administration come up, because in 4 years' time, the vision of energy might be a little bit different as well. So it's quite interesting, because here you have a window for opportunity for US, which is going to be quite massive. Inside those, this boom, of course, LNG is the biggest boom by far, but oil is booming as well. Electricity is booming as well. And I mean, all the forecasts after 2030 in US are still going up. And it's quite interesting to see that it's still going up even after 2030, meaning that, okay, the first wave of project will not be enough to absorb the increasing demand of US energy in terms of output and consumption. So it means that there is a first wave that will be maintained at least for the next 5 years. Inside this market, independent companies are keen. Clearly, they're driving the market today. Behind those independent companies, I mean, it's no more redneck like it used to be with a pickup truck in the Permian Basin. First, those companies are giant. They are giant companies which are backed by private bank, by investment fund, people like BlackRock, Blackstone, etc., etc. So those companies have a buying power, they have a lot of financial resources, and of course, they are able to invest and re-inject a lot of cash on the market. For the US companies, operators are doing fantastic work, but also the engineering companies, because of course, if you have some operators putting money on the table, you need engineering company able to deliver those projects. And while US engineering companies were a little bit down for a time, now they are back to the game with huge backlogs. And for example, in US companies, nobody is talking about delocalization. Okay, all the US engineering companies, their first problematic today is how to hire more people to deliver more projects. Okay, and for example, when the program internally they have of artificial intelligence are not to replace human, it's just to help human deliver more projects. So it's quite interesting to see how much the demand is still massive for engineering capacity in Europe. And then if you look at the market, and LNG is great, oil and gas is dead, but energy transition is not completely going down. To be honest, some part yes, but some part are skyrocketing clearly. No, the change is to say that okay, we stop all the, I would say, R&D project. No, we need to make money. Okay, and that's a big maturing phase, which is happening, I would say, in a few months. Also because of the US, the government pulled the plug on all the public money for this energy transition, meaning that only the business which will be viable will maintain in terms of project. And of course, it has to be taken into account by the companies for their strategy on project, which means that part of the energy transition will stop, but another part will also accelerate, because if you are starting without public money to benefit, it means that it will accelerate the investment in that path. So that's also what we see in the figures, to be honest, and that's what we start to see also in the announcement of project. So most likely that will be the path of way for the next coming years. It has been a lot of us talking. You can start to ask your question in the chat. Of course, I mean, today's session is a bit specific, so it can be not question, but it can be opinion. If you have feedback, or you want to share some detail about your vision of your market, because all of you have been impacted by US and Trump election in the coming month. If it's political, keep it for yourself. But if it's business, it would be quite interesting to share, of course. And again, I invite you to our next webinar on the majors and the international companies on May, because they've been going back and forth since COVID. So sometimes it's a little bit unclear how they organize and what are their target. So we'll take 1 hour to make sure that it's quite transparent for everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. And should we jump to the question, Jack?